All right, lots to cover today. We're going to get through some of the city issues first, and of course, and then we'll touch on why we're here, and we'll also bring our friends up from the Rockwool team and the American Magic to share a couple of thoughts with you and take any questions that you may have with all the great work that they have going. First and foremost, obviously, property taxes. And the proposal that's being discussed in Tallahassee is on our radar and front-facing for us right now. Some of the numbers that we've run, a $250,000 exemption would exempt about 72% of the homes in the city. So those homes would no longer be paying for service. I think one thing that's forgotten is because of Save Our Homes, someone would hear that and say, well, wait a second. You're telling me, Mayor, that 72% of homes are worth $250,000 or less. Where can I find one of those? Well, it isn't that. It's the taxable value that because that has already been controlled over generations of time with Save Our Homes. So, but the point is 72% of households inside the city limits would no longer be paying any property tax for any type of service. By our calculations, a homestead exemption of $250,000 would be a $6.4 million cut to our general fund. Estimated loss in year one would be just over $4 million, and year two would be just under $2.4 million. And that's based on our calculations from the tax rolls, and it may not include the more recently released data by the property appraiser. The general fund, one of the biggest confusions, I would say, set this topic aside, one of the biggest confusions in this job, period, is the different ways that different buckets of money can be used. You guys in the media see that all the time where the city announces an infrastructure project and they say, well, you're going to spend that. Why don't you spend it on this? Well, the vast majority of the time, 99% of the time, it's either there isn't enough money in the general fund to fund capital projects or infrastructure projects. It has to come from grant money from the feds, from the state, or it's got to be specific earmarked dollars like the CRA. And things like that. So the general fund, which is what we're discussing here, the property tax, is what pays the salaries of the people that are out doing that work. Public safety, you take our general fund in the city of Pensacola, public safety makes up 60% of it. So literally the majority of the dollars that go into our general fund, the largest funder of the general fund is property tax. 60% of what we spend in the general fund is on police and fire. I always point out, I take the opportunity to point out, your escrow payment, there's lots of confusion. Your escrow payment is not your taxes. We'll get an email, and I think sometimes the confusion is intentional in this conversation, but you'll get an email saying, well, my property tax went from $1,500 to $5,000 last year, and it's my homestead. Well, that's not legally possible. What's happening, and maybe what we should be spending as much time on, is discussing what wind insurance costs are, where you have insurance costs on fixed in the same issue that we're using right now to attack this issue is no different. Homeowners insurance, wind insurance, somehow that sits idly by outside the conversation. Yet there is no control on the increase of wind insurance. It can go to 2 times, 3 times year over year, and so unfortunately for our citizens, my experience is. We get emails, or we see someone on the street corner who says, I can't believe my homesteaded property tax went up, and they're actually talking about their escrow, which means that their insurance has gone up. So I really urge everybody to actually look at that tax bill. It's available online. You don't have to have saved it from the year before, and look at the taxable value of your home, what you're actually paying versus the value of your home, and make sure that you understand that that wind insurance is not part of the discussion here. Raising service fees, of course, is unlikely to generate enough money to offset that loss. What also is lost in this discussion is there are no, I can tell you how these conversations normally go when we point out the amount of money in property tax that helps fund public safety. We'll get a retort from a citizen that says, well, that's okay. You can just, collect it some other way. Well, the state legislature has already limited local government's ability to collect it any other way. So unfortunately, in the court of public opinion, there's this idea that we can now mythically create a tax that would be an offset We are not legally allowed to do that, nor do we think that that's really the best way to do it, even if you could. But nonetheless, to again inform and educate the citizens that there is not a lever that a local government. This is how, for the last, I don't know, 100 years or so, this is how money was collected, is through property tax. And so, obviously what we're setting up for here is the idea that local governments and local counties, your local government will now need to be, under this format, would need to be marching down to Tallahassee with a tin cup, and we're going to have to come ask every year and play that game and figure out how much money is going to be offset under the current format right now. All that being said, I think this is the most important thing to understand. There's going to be lots of opinions. Local governments are going to be vilified by saying, oh, well, they've had this increase. Listen, I think looking at, I think you guys know me well enough in every department in our city, I think looking at ways to modernize the way we do things, I'm always open to. So to me, this is less about a discussion about property tax, should it or shouldn't it be. And again, the way that you vilify local governments is that when we push back and we say this is how much money we're going to lose, say, oh, well, it's waste. Oh, well, you shouldn't have to continue to pay that. Okay, well, let's have a holistic discussion around how that should work. We've done this for decades. And then now over a long weekend, we're going to figure out that we want to completely change the format of how governments are funded. So in my opinion, this is not the mayor saying whether we should or shouldn't have some type of modernization of property tax or some type of relief. I want to be clear about that. But what's being intentionally lost in this conversation is you must either be for or against. I'm not sure why they vetoed the $1 million to analyze this during the session last year. That would have been really helpful, I think, at this time, is for us to fully understand what the impacts were and are or will be for this type of situation. So the analogy I keep using is what you're ultimately proposing is if there's to be a significant cut, if any of us were to have a pay cut to your income, in this case, the city having a cut to its income, whether you agree with it or you disagree with it, a significant cut to income, and that our reaction to it is to sell your car, now you can't get to your job. So I don't think that would be the most prudent way. So it's not about whether there's going to be a cut or not. It's about coming up with the most logical, common sense way to be able to ensure that the police cars can show up at your house, that the firefighters can put the fire out at your house, and that we can fill potholes and we can keep 95 parks and 11 community centers running. That is the discussion I want to have. So if we want to talk about reformatting, modernization, changes to property tax, lower that, and do something else, I certainly think it should always be in the citizens' best interest that we look at the best way to do something. But this is half the story, and it's being thrust upon us in a three-day week. So obviously, we're going to be paying close attention to that and see what'll happen. It's going to change by the hour. My comments may change tomorrow, as you guys know, because this is moving very, very quickly. Just to give you an example, our budget to you remember $4 million cut first year, 2.4 the second year, which would be a recurring 6.4 under what's proposed now. Our budget to staff and run community centers is 2.8 million. So just all of them, all 11. That's staff, that's the facilities, that's everything. That's where our seniors go, it's where our children play. And the landscaping upkeep maintenance budget, not if anything breaks, but just our normal upkeep is about 1.3 million at our 95 parks. So if you just want to look at that, that's 4.1 million. So all maintenance of 95 parks, all operations of community centers is about that amount that we would lose instantly. On the public works side, stormwater to keep neighborhood streets from flooding. So our entire stormwater budget to attack that as part of the general fund was 2.7 million. Street traffic, lighting, and intersections had 1.4 million budgeted this year. So same thing. So if you don't care about stormwater, street traffic, lights, or intersections, then 4 million may not be much to you. But those are some of the recurring items that come out of our general fund. This doesn't even address the CRA, and I don't have lots of solutions to give you other than some problems that certainly arise. We have bonded dollars in the CRA. I'm curious that if those are bonded against future property tax revenues. So our CRAs get 95% of both the county and city's property tax. So I don't know what the legalities are of the citizens and the promise of bonded dollars in future years and how that impacts CRAs. Maybe that's something that'll be hashed out in these 72 hours. But that is something that I think is going to be up for a real discussion. I expect that isn't just going to be coming from cities and counties. It's going to be coming from some financial institutions that have been asked to bond dollars in future years on the promise of this being the format, and now all of a sudden overnight it not being the format. So I don't know where that will go, but something that we're going to be paying close attention to as well. So we'll stay on top of it as best we can. There is no reality of which you can have a cut of this size. I know it's easy to throw around vague terminology and say fraud, waste, and abuse. We had an audit, and I didn't find I didn't see 6.4 million anywhere in the audit that was conducted by the state. So the bottom line is there will be a loss of services if this goes through. What that is, I would certainly have an open conversation with our constituents about what that may look like if this goes through. This wouldn't be a decision that would be made in the mayor's office or just solely at City Hall. I think we would lay out this is the loss in revenue. And right now our budget is an open book. There's lots of hyperbole out there about what does the city do and what do they spend it on. I think our rating proves the point that we're fiscally responsible. I think our forensic audit that just got finished in the last 2 weeks proves that yet again for another year that we continue to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. So again, we'll continue to monitor this as it moves forward and give you guys any updates as you need. I'm happy to answer any questions here shortly. Our city attorney, Adam Cobb, did send a letter to EMR Recycling on June 1st for care of the Jones Walker Law Firm's Pensacola office. And so to their credit, EMR has already reached back out to set up a meeting. So more to come on that. I don't have any times or dates. And the letter will obviously get you a copy if you don't already have it. Invites the owners of the facility to join in conversation surrounding the fire. I do want to correct an error we made. We said there was 4 incidents. There's been 5 in the last 2 years. So there's been 5 different fires we've had to report to. So it does note that part of PFD's response to those prior fires, the city fire marshal communicated numerous fire suppression and public safety requirements to EMR, including better management of the size and spacing of scrap piles at the facility. While investigations ongoing, initial investigations indicate deficiencies in compliance with the fire marshal's prior instructions. The city is working with local, state, and federal partners to further investigate those facts and identify any fire suppression and related public safety deficiencies at the facility, as well as related opportunities for EMR to address and improve the same. So the city now, we said, hope and expect that they'll join in the conversations. And we do appreciate them quickly responding to say that we'll meet, and we will certainly get back to our citizens and to you in the media about those issues. Palafox vehicle traffic, all good on Palafox so far. Work is continuing on the side streets. Government Street, east and west, is open, which I know is the commute for some of our media members. So, and that's obviously one of our high priorities. The airport update, since we are here, don't want to miss the opportunity to share some of the airport news. Breeze, which started again in 2024 with just 2 flights to Tampa each week, is deepening their commitment to Pensacola. We've been informed by that both Fort Lauderdale and Orlando will now immediately go to 7-day-a-week service, and that has grown exponentially, and that will start July 1st. So there now will be a flight to Orlando direct, Fort Lauderdale direct every day starting July 1st. And they're also doubling their flights to Memphis and Bentonville, Arkansas, going from twice a week to 4 times a week. And we just had, I think we mentioned to you a couple weeks ago, Matt did, that based on a newly signed agreement with Breeze, they're now a signatory airline here at PNS, showing further commitments to the Pensacola market. So again, we started 2 times a week in mid-2024 to Tampa. We're now 31 flights a week, departures to 7 different markets with Breeze. So we do definitely appreciate our growing partnership with Breeze, and I know our citizens do as well. With all of that, I'll ask our American Magic and Rockwool folks to come join me up here. We are here because in a few minutes we're going to go down and see the new mural highlighting our partnership with American Magic, and certainly to increase a sense of place, not just at the baggage claim, but in our city. We talk about becoming one of the largest sailing destinations, if not the most prominent in the United States. then we have to certainly be walking that walk and make sure that our visitors and our residents realize and gain that awareness. So we appreciate the gift from American Magic. This is something that they handled at their expense, and Illuma Designs, a local Pensacola company, worked in collaboration with American Magic, the airport, and in our office on the art itself. So we're excited to have that new addition, and again, ties us to all of the amazing trajectory that we have in the sport of sailing here at the city. So this partnership doesn't just mean murals and saying that we're the sailing destination of the United States. It's already started. I'll allow Tyson to elaborate that this partnership also means local job growth with recent hires from training programs at UWF, at Pensacola State, even at Children's Home Society, where we're starting to have our local kids and our local young people be able to have job opportunity in the talent pipeline with American Magic. So with that, I'll invite our guests up here and allow Tyson Lamont, the COO of American Magic, to share a few words.
First of all, just want to say thank you to DC and to Matt. Obviously, we wouldn't have been able to put this branding opportunity at the airport if it wasn't for the support of both of them. When I think about American Magic in Pensacola, I think so much about the community, and everything that we do every single day here wouldn't be possible without community support. DC touches on it, but the UWFs, Pensacola State and Children's Home generally are a big part of our team, and being able to have branding at the airport to show more people this is what American Magic is doing in the community, I think is only good for us. And then also to look across and see the Blue Angels on the other side of the baggage claim, I think is an amazing opportunity for both of us, because truly when we're out in the water and they're flying, it feels like it's a really special location. And I don't think there's many locations in the world that could say they've got the Blue Angels and high performance sailing team out there sailing. To elaborate a little bit more on the program, obviously DC keeps the community really well updated on what we're doing, but at the moment, we're operating in the aerospace industry. Everybody knows we've got a large contract there, and we're continuing to fulfill orders there. Our sailing operations have kicked off with the team that we're supporting for the next America's Cup. We were on the water 2 weeks ago, and we're going to be back on the water this weekend with 2 boats in Pensacola, which is obviously amazing for the locals to see the team out in the water. At the same time, we've just got back from being in New York with the SailGP event, and American Magic announced a partnership with one of the SailGP teams, Rockwell Racing. And people might say, okay, why is the team doing that? The reason we're doing that is because we believe in the league, and we believe in the long-term commitment the league has made to our organisation and also to Pensacola. And truly meeting with all those teams and talking about the facility that we have in Pensacola and the opportunities that all the teams will have when they come to the local community, I think was received really well. And I'd really much look forward to October and seeing all the foreign teams coming out and sailing on Pensacola Bay and showing them the community support that we've received as a team, and all of them receiving. And as we've gone through this process, we've reached out to local restaurants, local hotels, and everybody has been so supportive of this and making sure that when all these teams come here, they feel the same support that we had. But then, as DC says, being able to make sure that we're bringing on local staff to be able to experience what we live every single day. So it's a really exciting time for the team right now, and we're happy to take any questions that you guys may have.
Tyson, when y'all started here, y'all had a original, I'm sure you had a business plan, you had a pro forma. Adding these other revenue streams, are y'all ahead of schedule, or where are y'all in where you thought you would be right?
Yeah, it's a good question. We talk about this often, Rick, within our organisation, and one thing that we have is an amazing group of people. And I always say, any organisation, it doesn't matter what it is, it's all about the people within the walls. So when we first came back here in let's just say 22, after the Auckland America's Cup, and we worked really hard with the city to let's make Pensacola a long-term home, at that point we're sitting there thinking, okay, the race team is what everybody sees, but we need to be much more than just a race team, because the race team is all about the high performance and how do we travel, how do we keep, say, the sailors on the water and achieving results. But as an organisation, we're so much more than that. And so being able to add the composite manufacturing and, whether it be aerospace or defence, is a huge part of our organisation. Looking back on it now, if you had have asked us 14 months ago, would we have all these amazing projects in the building at the same time? There's no way I would have thought that we would have landed everything. But at the same time, it's a good problem to have, because obviously we're juggling a lot of balls in there, but it gives us more opportunity to bring more team members locally and abroad into the team. And, whether it's a local, student coming in from Children's Home Society who probably would have never dreamed of working for an organization like this, and giving him an opportunity that he wouldn't have had if the team was here, or bringing somebody from Italy over to come work for the team. And the first time they go to Pensacola Beach, they're going to tell everybody in Italy when they go back, wow, I just found the most beautiful beach in the world in Pensacola. So as an organization, right now we're very thankful for the support. And you're right, we've got a lot of projects on, but it's our job to execute.
I don't have any questions. Pretty much answered.
Perfect.
Good.
Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And before we head down, I'm happy to take any questions on any other non-sailing Pensacola things.
On Breeze Airways, you mentioned them as a signatory airline. What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm gonna have our signatory expert, Matt Coughlin, come make sure I don't talk out of turn.
Great question, Rick. Basically, think of it this way. Think of it as a short-term lease agreement versus a longer term. It's a little bit more commitment. So for folks that are non-signatory agreements that we have here, what they do is they actually pay a premium when it comes to rates and charges. It's about 30% payment or premium. But what that gives them, it gives them a little bit more flexibility on coming into the market, leaving the market, and whatnot. So Breeze, like some of our other airlines, is determined they want to be here in Pensacola, they want to commit, and it's great to have them on board. And you can see they added, just this month, they put 6,600 more seats into the market, Pensacola market, than they did a year ago, June. So they've really grown a lot here, and we look forward to working with them in the future.
How does, but how does, having lost Spirit, are we on course for filling that gap, or are we have to fill that gap?
That's another great question, and I'll tell you. So this month, what we're seeing is we're seeing a little bit lower than the same month last year by about 10%. That almost equates to the amount of seats that Spirit had in the market, right? But what's happening right now is Breeze, one of our partners, has jumped into that market, and you see with them going to daily in July, that's going to pick right back up. Now, it's not instantaneous because when you have an airline come in, they have to move assets in here and whatnot. So there's a little bit of a gap, but I expect that to pick way back up in come July.
Good, thank you. How's the Vegas trip?
We're working it. You'll be the first to call.
A few friends. All right. Well, what else? Anything?
I kind of had another question
Sure.
as far as the tax cut proposal.
Yeah.
You kind of gave us numbers. I guess is there any sort of in particular that you think would be the hardest, or is it kind of hard to tell right now?
Well, naturally, what you're going to look at is you're going to look at 60% of the general fund. So start at the very top, and again, to help educate our citizens. I had someone say to me, "Oh man, the city's budget went up 24% last year." Well, that's not possible. That's only possible by grants. And so things that happen at the airport can fluctuate what the overall total is. What matters in this discussion is what your general fund is, which are the most flexible dollars that we have. So of about a $340 million budget, only about 65 million of that 340 million is general fund. But the vast majority of what's spent in general fund, the number one line item is police and fire. And that's, so of that general fund, 60% of our general fund is spent on public safety. And much of that being salaries and all that. So, it's always interesting to pigeonhole an argument and say, well, property tax has gone up this amount and population has only gone up this amount. Has there been analysis done on what we were paying police and firefighters in 2018 versus 2025, growing pensions, all of these other things, the visitor base that requires you to pulse up, and if you're in a coastal city and a tourism-based city, so there's lots. Listen, there's arguments I can make that will attempt to be debunked by folks that support it, and vice versa. That's unfortunately part of the political aspect of this discussion. But again, if this was, in my opinion, if this was about true reform of saying we don't believe the most modern solution is the decades that we've spent charging property tax, and that we should look at some other ways or some other cuts or any of that, then that's one discussion. But immediately jumping that in 3 days to you either are for property tax or you're against it is what, in my opinion, is disingenuous. So let's have an entire conversation. If you want to lower property tax or abolish with homesteads and all that, then let's figure out what the other mechanisms that need to move so we don't have to cut police and firefighters, so we don't have to close community centers, so we don't have to, and so it's the clunkiness of the way that this is being rolled out that I think we need to really take a pause on, as opposed to having to draw battle lines on whether you absolutely want to charge. What cities and counties are being vilified for is, well, since we don't like the way that this is being rolled out, then we just want to charge as much as possible. That is not necessarily the case. It is that we want this to be thoughtful, and we want to make sure that we can continue to provide the same services that we provide. And if there's specific cuts that need to be made or modifications or pivots in how funding streams work, then let's have a discussion in totality, not over a 3-day weekend.
And with the southern recycling, I know you said y'all are kind of looking into some deficiencies that are still left over from fire marshal recommendations. Do you know exactly what some of those deficiencies are?
Yeah, so we the ones in the letter, that were most prominent to us, obviously, were our sharing with them in previous that the height of the piles, and I won't attempt to go much further than that into my fire chief mode and defer to Chief Craner on anything more advanced in terms of the technical aspects, other than the fact that it's pretty common sense logic that the higher a pile of potential flammable items is, the harder it is to put out. So we have had continually advised on that. It was clear and pretty evident when our team went out there that was not being adhered to and not being listened to. So that would probably be the biggest one off the cuff. It is not foreign that facilities like this have issues. It is foreign for cities to have 5 fires where our taxpayers are paying to have to go put out these fires happening in a span of 2 years. That is what the outlier, and that's why something has to be addressed. So, we're looking forward to hearing their side of the story, their discussion, what can be put in place. And again, we've had some success with other issues that aren't necessarily, doesn't mean we don't have the legal authority to go into private property and say someone can't operate something that's commercially allowed to operate there. But I certainly hope that we have community partners. And what we've noticed through TSA, what we've noticed through Lumos, what we've noticed through these types of things is, when we raise our hand and say this isn't going the way that it should for our citizens, we've generally gotten some pretty good, at least feedback or some process improvements that make us feel a little bit better moving forward. So that's what I'm hopeful for, is that it's a good, productive conversation and that there's some tangible results from it that makes our city safer and doesn't put our firefighters in harm's way.
You mentioned what you can't do legally. Do you know what you could do legally?
I mentioned last week, I think what that we wanted to get a letter to certainly convey our disappointment and our grave concern about this pattern. That is what we sent out on June 1st. We are concurrently working on looking at what our legal code enforcement, there's a multitude of things that we can look at and to say, what foothold does the city have to ensure that operations like this are being good community partners and are following the rules. So more to come on that. That's going to take a deeper analysis for us to understand. But I can address probably the most simplistic argument that is made that I certainly would have to refute, which is, which unfortunately happens again in this job a lot, is the mayor or the city council does not have the ability to go to private property in a legally allowable use in terms of zoning, in terms of being a business that has the license to operate. We can't come in and just tell someone they can't operate on private property. And that's a big misperception when it comes to development. People say, well, why did the mayor let them? Well, because it's private money on private property. I mean, there's a limitation, rightfully so, of government to be able to come in and do whatever they want, or whatever that mayor or that city council or that county commissioner wants to do. So I certainly respect those protections, and that people can do their private business on private property. But I also expect that our citizens are respected, our firefighters are respected, and that you're doing everything that you can to make sure that we maximize that harmony between our community and the work that you're allowed to do there.
I I just had a question real quick about the Birdon USA.
Yeah.
Where does it stand as far as negotiations go and I guess the proposed facility?
Yeah, we ultimately we're down to daily updates at this point of getting the Triumph term sheet, our term sheet with Birdon and the city. Again, it's kind of a three-way negotiation in terms of the Triumph dollars that are being requested. Because remember, those Triumph dollars have to be requested by the city with a partner. So we're working through that, but we've made a lot of, I would say in the last 7 to 10 days, we've made a lot of headway. So I can't give you anything with finality today, but I feel very, very positive about the progress and about getting this on the Triumph agenda as a term sheet and where our discussions are. We're just down to some of the nitty-gritty details of that term sheet. And we won't work everything out at this term sheet level. Obviously, a term sheet is more simplified than the lease itself. But we've already made some headway on some of the smaller things that would be in the lease. So I feel very good about it, very bullish about it. Can't give you an exact day, but I would say in the coming days that we should have something concrete to give you.
On the property tax issue, do you have any info on how it would impact the CRA and the bond?
Yeah, I mentioned that we don't. And again, we have 2017 bonds, we have 2019 bonds that are outstanding that we make a payment on. Listen, I know there's going to be other cities and counties that are going to have even bigger examples than we will across the state of Florida. I have no clue. I guess that's for the 72-hour discussion to figure out on what is the legal ability of the state of Florida to allow dollars to be bonded out to a certain time frame based on the incoming property tax, and then now decide that property tax isn't incoming anymore. It certainly is not my expertise and not my legal purview, but it's a question we're asking. So I can't give you a good answer, Jim, other than we're asking the same question you are, because we would have a bond payment due, and we would not have property tax to then pay that bond, and where does that put us with banks? Where does that put banks with the state of Florida? I don't know. I guess we'll figure out in a couple days. Anything else? All right. Well, we'll head down to baggage claim and take a couple photos in front of the new mural. Thank you, guys.